When a man says, "You're overthinking it," it sounds harmless, even caring. On the surface, it seems like he's trying to calm you down, help you stop worrying. But beneath that polished surface lies something subtle. A psychological deflection, a quiet redirection that shifts the focus away from his behavior and onto your reaction. It's one of the most effective tools a man can use when he doesn't want to be held accountable, because it attacks the very thing that gives you power in a relationship, your intuition. Now, let's pause for a moment. Every woman who has ever loved deeply knows the difference between paranoia and intuition. Paranoia is fear-based. It comes from insecurity or a past wound. But intuition is wisdom disguised as a whisper. It's your subconscious connecting dots before your conscious mind can fully see the pattern. So, when a man tells you you're overthinking, what he's really doing is attempting to silence that whisper. Not because you're wrong, but because you might be dangerously close to being right. This is how emotional deflection works. Instead of addressing what you're sensing, he reframes the situation so that you feel guilty for sensing it. You begin to think, maybe I am imagining things. Maybe I am being too sensitive. And with each self-doubt, you train yourself to trust him more and yourself less. That's how emotional disconnection begins. Not through betrayal itself, but through the erosion of self-trust. Think about the deeper psychology behind it. When people are hiding something, their goal isn't just to keep a secret. It's to maintain control. If he can make you feel like your emotional awareness is the problem, he no longer has to change his behavior. He just has to keep you questioning yourself. That's the brilliance and the tragedy of manipulation. It's never about proving his innocence. It's about making you question your perception. And here's what's important. In a healthy relationship, a man who truly respects you doesn't fear your curiosity. He welcomes it. He doesn't say, "You're overthinking." He says, "I understand why you might feel that way. Let me explain." Because he knows that reassurance is not control, it's connection. The moment someone tries to make you feel ashamed for thinking too much, it's not your thoughts that are the problem. It's their transparency. Let's be honest. Every man knows what that phrase does. It sounds calm. It sounds rational. It makes him appear emotionally stable, and it makes you look irrational by contrast. But emotional intelligence isn't about appearing calm, it's about being accountable. When a man avoids that accountability, he's not trying to solve the issue. He's trying to survive it. And survival mode in relationships usually means hiding something that can't withstand your awareness. Now, not every man who says, "You're overthinking it," is automatically guilty of deception. Sometimes it's said in frustration or out of fear of conflict. But when this phrase becomes a pattern, when it's used every time you bring up an uncomfortable truth, every time your gut stirs, it's no longer a response, it's a strategy. There's a deep philosophical lesson here. Human beings seek peace, but often we mistake silence for peace. Real peace is not the absence of tension, it's the presence of honesty. A relationship built on, "Don't worry about it," may feel easier in the moment, but it slowly empties the space where emotional intimacy should live. Because when you start censoring your truth to keep the relationship calm, you stop being in a relationship with the person. You start being in a performance. So what do you do when a man tells you you're overthinking? You pause, not to question yourself, but to observe his reaction. If he genuinely cares, he'll listen, he'll explain. He'll make an effort to restore your sense of safety. But if he gets defensive, dismissive, or makes you feel small for asking, that's your answer. That's not love protecting your heart. That's manipulation protecting his secret. There's a kind of quiet strength in not arguing when someone gaslights you. You don't have to prove your intuition. You don't need to defend your perception. The truth doesn't demand permission to exist. It simply does. And if someone's words consistently ask you to silence that truth, they're not loving you. They're managing you. You see, the most powerful relationships are built on psychological safety. When a man feels safe with you, he tells you things before you have to ask. When you feel safe with him, you don't need to decode every word or analyze every silence. The moment that safety disappears, communication becomes performance. Every question feels dangerous, every answer feels rehearsed. That's when love stops being real and starts being fragile. So, if you find yourself hearing, "You're overthinking it," again and again, remind yourself clarity is not overthinking. It's respect for your own emotional intelligence. The right man won't try to quiet your intuition. He'll admire it. He'll recognize that your awareness isn't an accusation. It's an investment. You're not trying to catch him. You're trying to understand him. And that's the kind of woman who can't be manipulated. The one who trusts her senses more than someone else's excuses. The one who knows that peace without honesty is just a prettier version of chaos. So when he says you're overthinking it, don't shrink. Smile calmly and think, no, I'm just seeing what you hoped I wouldn't. Because that's what intuition does. It sees behind the mask long before the truth reveals itself. Closing statement. Never apologize for thinking deeply or feeling intuitively. Those instincts are the armor of your soul. A man who values you will never use your awareness against you. He'll meet it with truth. Because the moment someone tries to convince you that your insight is the problem, you've already uncovered the truth they hoped you'd ignore. When a man says, I just need some space, it's one of those phrases that can send a woman into a spiral of confusion. Because it's so vague, so emotionally ambiguous, it can mean almost anything. And that's exactly why it's powerful. Those 5 words can sound innocent, reasonable, even mature. But in many cases, especially when his actions don't match his words, that phrase isn't about needing peace, it's about creating distance to manage something. Or someone. He doesn't want you to see. Now, let's be fair. Everyone needs space sometimes. Emotional space, mental clarity, time to think, that's normal. But when a man uses, I need space, as a curtain rather than a doorway, as a way to obscure his intentions rather than clarify them, something deeper is happening. He's not stepping back to breathe. He's stepping back to recalibrate. He's trying to figure out how to maintain 2 emotional realities without one exposing the other. And in relationships, that's often where hidden dynamics begin to show. Think about how this phrase plays out in real life. He's warm, present, affectionate, and then suddenly something shifts. Messages become shorter. Calls are delayed. His availability changes. And when you ask what's wrong, he says, I just need some space. You're left wondering if you did something wrong, if you were too much, too intense, too emotional. But what he's actually done is planted a seed of self-doubt in your mind while protecting his own emotional escape route. This is a psychological strategy that operates on subtle emotional terrain. When someone says they need space, they remove themselves from accountability. You can't argue with it. After all, needing space sounds healthy. It gives them the moral high ground. They're not avoiding you, they're working on themselves. They're not distant. They're centering. But in truth, that space becomes a holding pattern, a limbo that keeps you emotionally invested without giving you any clarity. Here's the deeper truth most people miss. When a man truly loves you and simply needs to recharge, his space still includes reassurance. He won't disappear, he'll communicate. He'll say, I just need a bit of time to process things, but I care about you. I'll check in soon, that's emotional responsibility. But when a man says, I need space, and then withdraws completely, without explanation, without communication, without closure, that's not space. That's avoidance dressed up as self-awareness. And here's what often happens next while you're respecting his space. He's investing that energy somewhere else. Maybe it's emotional validation from another woman, maybe it's the freedom to explore without guilt. Either way, he's creating distance not to heal, but to hide. And when you later discover the truth, he'll say, I told you I needed space. It's the perfect defense. Because technically, he never lied. He just used language so ambiguous that you couldn't hold him accountable. This is where emotional intelligence becomes essential. In relationships, people reveal their intentions not only through what they say, but how they act once they've said it. If a man needs space, and that space leads to disconnection rather than clarity, you have your answer. Love doesn't fear communication. Space doesn't mean silence. You can't build trust in the dark. Let's look at this philosophically. The phrase, I need space, appeals to our compassion. It plays on our desire to be understanding partners, to give someone what they need. But that compassion becomes dangerous when it's one-sided, when it's used to keep you compliant rather than connected. Because genuine love doesn't need to disappear to breathe. Real connection allows for individuality within the bond, not outside of it. When someone has to retreat entirely to feel free, What they're really saying is that they no longer feel safe being authentic in your presence. And that often means they've already created emotional safety elsewhere. There's also a power dynamic at play. The person asking for space controls the narrative. They get to decide when the connection resumes, if it resumes, and under what terms. Meanwhile, you're left in emotional suspension, waiting, wondering, trying not to reach out, trying to respect their boundary while questioning your worth. That uncertainty keeps you emotionally tethered, and for someone hiding another relationship, that's exactly what they need. Your patience, your loyalty, your silence. So, what should you do when you hear those words? You step back, not to wait, but to watch, observe whether his actions match his claim. Does he come back with more openness, more clarity, more respect for your feelings? Or does he reappear only when it's convenient, only when he needs the comfort of your presence, but not the accountability of your questions? The answer to that tells you everything you need to know about whether the space was about him or about her. At its core, love is not about constant closeness, it's about consistent honesty. Needing space should never mean abandoning communication. A man who truly values you will never use distance to confuse you. He'll use it to strengthen you both. He won't make you feel like you're losing him just because he needs to find himself. But when space becomes a wall instead of a window, when silence replaces dialogue, that's not emotional maturity, that's concealment. And concealment is the soil in which betrayal grows. So, if you ever find yourself hearing, "I just need space," don't rush to fill that silence with excuses for him. Let the silence do its work, because in that silence, truth always begins to echo. Closing statement, remember, someone who truly loves you won't need to vanish to protect their truth. Space should heal, not hide. So the next time a man asks for space, don't fear the distance. Observe what fills it. Because in that space, you'll see the difference between someone who's finding clarity and someone who's covering up a lie. When a man says, "You're overthinking it," it may sound like a harmless reassurance, almost caring, even. But in truth, that phrase is often a quiet weapon. It's subtle, it's emotionally loaded, and it's designed to shift the focus away from his behavior and onto your perception of it. The moment he utters those words, he's planting a seed of doubt in your mind, not about what he's doing, but about whether you can even trust your own instincts. And that, right there, is where emotional manipulation begins to take root. Let's be honest, human intuition is powerful. Especially when it comes to relationships, most people know when something doesn't feel right. You can sense it. In the tone of his voice, the inconsistency in his stories, the way his phone suddenly becomes private territory. These are small signals, but they add up. When you bring them up and he responds with, "You're overthinking it," what he's really doing is invalidating your reality. He's making you question whether your mind is the problem, not his actions. That's not reassurance, that's redirection. And redirection is one of the most effective ways to keep someone blind to the truth. Because now, instead of trusting your gut, you start policing your emotions. You tell yourself, "Maybe I'm just being insecure. Maybe I'm imagining things." That's exactly what he wants. Because the more you question yourself, the less you'll question him. You see, healthy partners don't need to make you doubt yourself. They don't need to convince you that your feelings are invalid or that your observations are exaggerated. A secure man doesn't get defensive when you express concern. He gets curious. He says, "Tell me what's bothering you," not, "You're overreacting." The difference between those two responses is the difference between connection and control. One invites openness, the other shuts it down. Now, here's where the psychology becomes interesting. When a person repeatedly hears that their thoughts are too much, crazy, or overthinking, their brain begins to rewire around that feedback. They start to associate intuition with anxiety. They stop trusting their inner compass. This is how manipulation sustains itself, not through outright lies, but through repeated emotional gaslighting that teaches you to doubt your truth. Over time, he doesn't have to work as hard to hide anything, because you've been conditioned to hide the evidence from yourself. In relationships, this kind of emotional distortion is subtle but corrosive. You can't build intimacy where you're afraid of being misunderstood. You can't express love authentically when you're always second, guessing your emotions. And that's the tragic part. When you're constantly told you're overthinking, you start shrinking. You suppress your natural sensitivity, your intuition, your awareness, the very qualities that make you emotionally intelligent. But here's the truth most people don't realize. The phrase, "you're overthinking it," doesn't come from a place of understanding. It comes from a place of discomfort. He says it because your intuition threatens his illusion. Your questions bring him closer to exposure. Your awareness disrupts the narrative he's trying to control. So rather than answer directly, he reframes the issue. He makes the conversation about your supposed paranoia, not his behavior. Let's step back and look at this philosophically. Every relationship is an exchange of perception. You see each other, you interpret each other, and you learn to trust those interpretations over time. When one person consistently undermines the other's perception, they're not just breaking trust. They're breaking your sense of self. They're turning your emotional intelligence into self-doubt. And that's a dangerous thing, because a woman who doubts her own intuition becomes easy to deceive. Matthew Hussey often emphasizes that true confidence in love isn't about being perfect. It's about trusting what you know and what you feel. When something feels off, it usually is. You don't need to have proof to honor your perception. You just need courage to recognize when someone's trying to dim your clarity. Because the moment you start believing that you're too much for noticing what's wrong, you've given away the most powerful thing you have: your intuition. And here's the irony: men who truly care about you want you to trust your instincts. They want you to bring up what's bothering you because they value transparency. They don't see your emotional intelligence as a threat. They see it as a bridge. But a man who's hiding something can't afford that honesty. So, he labels your awareness as overthinking because it protects his secrecy. The truth is, love shouldn't require you to ignore your intuition. It shouldn't make you feel like your awareness is a flaw. If you have to suppress what you notice to keep the peace, then what you're preserving isn't love. It's denial. And that's not peace, that's quiet control. So the next time you hear you're overthinking it, pause. Don't rush to apologize for your sensitivity or dismiss your intuition. Instead, observe his reaction. Does he make space for your feelings, or does he make you feel guilty for having them? Because how a man responds to your emotional intelligence reveals everything about his emotional honesty. And I want you to remember this. You are not overthinking when you're asking for consistency. You're not crazy for noticing contradictions. You're not too much for wanting clarity. Those are signs of emotional maturity, not weakness. People who make you feel ashamed of those qualities aren't protecting your peace. They're protecting their secrets. Closing statement. When someone tells you that you're overthinking, understand what's really being said. Stop seeing too clearly. Don't dim your light just because it exposes the truth. Your intuition is not a flaw to fix. It's a strength to honor. So trust it, because the moment you stop questioning yourself and start observing their patterns instead, the truth has nowhere left to hide. When a man says, "I just need space," it sounds reasonable, even mature on the surface. After all, everyone needs space sometimes. But context is everything. Because when that phrase comes out of nowhere, when it's used right after you ask questions that make him uncomfortable, or when emotional intimacy starts to deepen, it often doesn't mean he needs space to breathe. It means he needs space to hide. You see, when a man is emotionally invested and truly wants a relationship with you, his version of space looks different. It's not about withdrawal, it's about balance. He might take time for himself, yes, but he doesn't disconnect from you. You still feel his presence, his consistency, his care. The communication remains open even when he's processing something privately. But when a man is hiding something, another woman, a secret, or an emotional entanglement he doesn't want you to see, space becomes a shield. It's the perfect excuse to pull away without accountability. Think about it. "I need space" gives him emotional distance and moral cover. It stops you from asking questions. It halts the conversation at the very moment you're getting close to the truth. He doesn't have to explain inconsistencies or answer uncomfortable questions. All he has to do is play the victim of pressure. It's manipulation disguised as vulnerability. Now let's break down the psychology of this dynamic. When someone suddenly demands space in a way that feels cold or calculated, it often triggers anxiety in the other person, especially someone who values connection. You start to wonder what you did wrong. You question whether you pushed too hard or cared too much. And before you know it, you're trying to earn back closeness from someone who's intentionally withholding it. That's the trap. The more you chase clarity, the more he retreats. The more you prove your understanding, the less he feels the need to be honest. A man who's hiding another woman will use space as a tool to compartmentalize his life. He'll create emotional distance when he needs time to manage his double narrative. The one he shows you and the one he hides. When he says he needs space, he's not reflecting. He's reorganizing his lies. He's recalibrating how to keep both sides from colliding. And while you sit there wondering whether you're being too demanding, he's ensuring that his secret life remains undisturbed. That's why emotional inconsistency is one of the biggest red flags you can't afford to overlook. One week he's fully present, calling, texting, sharing his day. The next, he's detached, vague, too busy. That fluctuation isn't about space, it's about secrecy, because genuine need for space is communicated with care. It comes with reassurance, not confusion. A man who truly needs time to think will say, "I just need a bit of time, but you mean a lot to me. I'll be back soon." He doesn't vanish. He doesn't make you feel small for wanting connection. Philosophically, the phrase, "I need space," can reveal something deeper about human avoidance. People often hide behind abstractions when they don't want to confront their truth. They use vague language to blur emotional accountability. Space, overwhelmed, busy. These are fog words. They give the illusion of depth while concealing intention. But clarity and care can coexist. You can ask for solitude without erasing someone's sense of security. You can take space without creating suspicion. It's when that space feels like disconnection, when it feels like you're being quietly punished for your curiosity, that it becomes emotionally manipulative. What's crucial to understand is that men who are honest about their emotions don't fear transparency. They don't need to retreat into silence every time a difficult truth arises. They don't use distance as a way to reset your expectations or condition your patience. But those who are hiding something thrive in that silence, because it allows their truth to go unexamined. The more room you give them, the more time they have to rewrite the story. So, the next time a man tells you he needs space, don't rush to close the gap. Observe what happens during that space. Does he reach out in small ways to keep the connection alive? Does he communicate where he stands? Or does he disappear and only return when it's convenient? Because that difference reveals everything. Genuine space nurtures the relationship. Deceptive space drains it. And here's something few people talk about. When you respect yourself enough not to chase someone during their withdrawal, you reveal their true intentions faster than any confrontation ever could. If his need for space was honest, he'll come back grounded and open. But if it was a cover, he'll stay distant until he needs something from you again. Attention, validation, or distraction. Either way, his actions in that silence will tell you what his words never could. Matthew Hussey often reminds his audience that confidence in relationships isn't about never caring. It's about caring without losing your clarity. You can empathize with someone's emotional state while still protecting your own peace. You can honor their space without surrendering your self-respect. The mistake too many people make is thinking that patience will earn them love. But love isn't earned through waiting, it's revealed through consistency. So, when someone says they need space, your job isn't to fill the silence, it's to listen to what the silence reveals. Does he come back with emotional honesty? Or does he return only when it suits his convenience? Because men who are emotionally unavailable or hiding something always return, but they never return differently. They return when they sense you've calmed down, when they think the questions have faded, when they believe they can re-enter your world without consequence. Closing statement: when a man says he needs space, don't rush to close the distance, let it reveal the truth. Silence has a way of exposing what words try to hide. The man who values you will use space to reflect. The man who's hiding something will use it to escape. The difference isn't in the distance. It's in what he does with it. Trust what the silence shows you, because sometimes the loudest truth is spoken when no one is saying anything at all. When a man says, "You're overthinking it," it might sound like he's trying to calm the situation down. But often, that phrase isn't about peace. It's about control. It's a way to dismiss your intuition without addressing what caused it. And that's dangerous, because the moment a person convinces you to doubt what you feel, they've already begun to control how you see the truth. Now, let's be clear, not every time someone says, "You're overthinking it," does it mean deception. Sometimes, we really do spiral into unnecessary worry, but in relationships, this phrase becomes suspicious when it's used repeatedly, not as reassurance, but as deflection. It's when your concern is valid, when your gut is whispering that something doesn't add up, and instead of getting answers, you get gaslit into silence. You see, emotional manipulation doesn't always show up as anger or cruelty. Sometimes it wears the mask of calmness. When a man tells you that you're overthinking, what he's often doing is discrediting your emotional intelligence. He's training you to mistrust your own perception. He's saying, "Your feelings are exaggerated. Your questions are irrational, and I'm the voice of reason here." But what he's really doing is shifting the power dynamic. Because if you start believing that your intuition is flawed, he can operate freely without accountability. There's a psychological term for this: gaslighting. It's when someone manipulates your sense of reality so that you begin to question your memory, your logic, and even your emotions. And it's subtle. It doesn't happen in one conversation. It builds over time. A comment here, a dismissal there, and before you realize it, you start apologizing for feelings that were never wrong to begin with. Think about how this usually unfolds. You notice something. Maybe he's been distant, his phone is always face down, or his schedule suddenly changes without explanation. You ask a gentle question, and instead of transparency, you get, "You're overthinking it." The tone might even be comforting, as if he's protecting you from your own emotions. But underneath that calm exterior is evasion. Because if he can make you feel like the problem is in your head, he doesn't have to deal with the real problem in his actions. Matthew Hussey often says that emotional awareness is a superpower. It's your internal compass. When something feels off, it usually is. Your intuition isn't paranoia. It's pattern recognition. It's your subconscious picking up on inconsistencies before your mind fully processes them. So, when a man tells you that you're overthinking, what he's really doing is asking you to ignore that inner alarm system. And when you do, he gains time and cover to continue whatever he's hiding. Now, here's the philosophical layer of this dynamic. Genuine connection thrives on emotional honesty. When two people are aligned, truth becomes a bridge, not a threat. But when someone is hiding another woman, or hiding emotional disloyalty, truth becomes the enemy. And instead of addressing the cause of your doubt, he attacks the existence of your doubt. That's not love, that's defense. Because love doesn't need to silence you to survive. In a healthy relationship, when you express a concern, your partner doesn't make you feel foolish for it. He leans in. He says, "I understand why you'd feel that way. Let's talk about it." That's what security looks like. Not perfection, but openness. When a man values the relationship, he doesn't shut down your feelings, he helps you understand them. But when he's hiding something, your awareness becomes his biggest threat. And that's why he tries to quiet it. So, how do you tell the difference between genuine reassurance and manipulation? It's in the consistency of his behavior. A sincere man doesn't just tell you not to worry. He gives you reasons not to. His words and actions align. You feel calmer not because he dismissed your thoughts, but because he addressed them with honesty. But a dishonest man leaves you more confused each time you talk. You walk away questioning yourself instead of feeling understood. And this is where many people lose themselves, in that confusion. Because once you start internalizing that your feelings are too much, or your sensitivity is a problem, you become easier to control. You begin to shrink, to self-censor, to overcorrect. And ironically, you start to actually overthink, not about the truth, but about how to avoid being labeled emotional. That's the psychological trap of manipulation.